Welcome everyone. My name is Saskia Mori and I'm a Pollution Support Advisor at the Joint Nature Conservation Committee. This presentation will introduce the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, or JNCC, and the Reducing Pollution Through Partnership project. We will explain the aim of the local sense check and set out the method used based on the information provided by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. We will then present the pilot country results specific to Mozambique, where we welcome the discussion based on how the results reflect your local knowledge. This video is third out of a series of 3 videos created to support the delivery of the Reducing Pollution Through Partnership project. The first video introduced the methods used in the global analysis, and the second video presented the results of the global analysis. This third video uses the results from the global analysis and zooms in on Mozambique to detail the results specific to your country. JNCC is a public body that advises the UK government and the devolved administrations on the United Kingdom and international nature conservation. Our people are dedicated to providing high-quality scientific evidence and advice on the natural environment. The aim of this project is to scope and help design a wider pollution programme to be delivered by the United Kingdom in low and middle income countries. The programme is to enhance the ability of these countries to manage and to reduce air, chemical and waste pollution. Our priority is to engage early with pilot countries to understand how better to deliver a fit-for-purpose pollution programme in the future. JNCC was commissioned by the United Kingdom Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, known as DEFRA, to deliver the project scoping year. The aim of the local sense check is to validate the preliminary results of the global analysis and to determine whether this reflects local knowledge in Mozambique. We are looking to find out whether the results are a true representation of how pollution impacts threatened species in your country, and your help is valuable in achieving this. As the basis for this analysis, we use data from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN Red List of threatened species. This is a list of species assessed for extinction risk using the IUCN Red List categories and a set of criteria. Threatened species are those with an assessed extinction risk as either critically endangered, or vulnerable, and these species have been included in this analysis. We have also included those listed as near threatened, and these are species who are close to the threatened thresholds or those that would be threatened without ongoing conservation measures. The data can be used to determine what has impacted which species globally. The information is publicly available on the IUCN webpage and the databases are available at request. This IUCN Red List assessment also includes the major threats to species, such as the different forms of pollution listed on this slide, as listed under Category 9 of the IUCN Red List Threat Categorisation Scheme. And this assessment is what formed the basis of the analysis. A more detailed explanation of the methods and criteria used can be found in the Pilot Country Pollution Analysis Report for Mozambique. From the global analysis, we are able to uncover the percentage of species impacted by pollution in Mozambique, given as a proportion of the total number of threatened species. The pie chart shows that 30% of species are threatened by pollution in Mozambique, with 70% of species impacted by other threats. Other threats, as classified by the IUCN Red List assessment, may include threats such as energy production and mining, biological resource use, geological events, and agriculture and aquaculture. We're interested to hear how these proportions shown relate to what you know about pollution in Mozambique. The global analysis also enables us to identify the percentage of species threatened by pollution that are also impacted by climate change. Of the species threatened by pollution in Mozambique, 86% are also impacted by climate change. This is compared to 14% of species being threatened by pollution but not climate change. As before, we are interested to hear how these proportions shall relate to what you know about pollution in Mozambique. In this table, you see the number of species impacted by pollution in Mozambique. This table groups the number of species into the higher pollution threat categories, but a more detailed results table of the pollution threat breakdown is available in the Pilot Country Pollution Analysis Report for Mozambique. At the top of the table, there are 190 species impacted by agricultural and forestry effluents, which includes the subcategories of nutrient loads, soil erosion, sedimentation, herbicides and pesticides, and unknown unrecorded. The unknown unrecorded category is for cases where the pollution is not specifically captured under the classification scheme, or where the source of the pollution may be unknown or from a historical source. Next down the table, and the pollution threat with the second highest number of species impacted, is industrial and military effluents impacting 165 species. This includes the subcategories of oil spills, seepage from mining, unknown unrecorded. At the bottom of the table, we find excess energy impacting 4 species. Excess energy includes the subcategories of noise pollution, light pollution, thermal pollution, and unknown unrecorded. We would like your feedback on whether there is any important information missing to help us understand the sources, types, locations, and impacts of pollutions in your country. Overlaying range maps of any species which is assessed as threatened by pollution can hotspot where multiple species are impacted. All entries only include ranges of species known to occur in an area. This gives us a global picture of the extent of species assessed as threatened by pollution, but we can zoom in on specific countries and explore the breakdown of species and their threats. We are looking to find out whether the information shown on the following pollution heat maps about the distribution of species threatened by each pollution threat type reflects your understanding and experience. It is worth noting that all heat maps and more detailed information about the species can be found in the Pilot Country Pollution Analysis Report for Mozambique. 163 species are affected by the higher pollution category of domestic and urban wastewater in Mozambique, which is made up of the subcategories of sewage and runoff, which I will present in the following 2 slides. This heat map shows the overlapping ranges for species where range data is available. Please see Video 1, Global Analysis Methods presentation. For reasons, data may not be available for all species. The darker areas where multiple species are impacted. Domestic and urban wastewater is defined by the IUCN Red List as waterborne sewage and non-point runoff from housing and urban areas that include nutrients, toxic chemicals, and/or sediments. There is hotspotting in the Mozambique Channel, represented by the darker areas. Darker areas in the channel and along the coastline could suggest that domestic and urban wastewater is impacting a greater number of coastal and/or marine species. There is also hotspotting inland, particularly around rivers in the south of Mozambique, between the city of Inhambane and the Maputo city suburb Matola, with darker areas around the cities of Praia de Belém and Xai-Xai. There is a large hotspot in the middle of the country in the Sofala and Zambezia provinces, and the hotspot in the north that spans from Niassa province near the city of Lixinga to the city of Palma in the northeast coast. Sewage is a subcategory of domestic and urban wastewater affecting 4 species, and this heat map shows the overlapping ranges for those species impacted by sewage in Mozambique, where range data is available. The darker areas represent multiple species impacted. Examples of sewage as defined by the IUCN Red List assessment include discharge from municipal waste treatment plants, leaking septic systems, untreated sewage, and outhouses. There is hotspotting predominantly along the coastline around the river systems, which could suggest this threat is impacting a greater number of aquatic, coastal, and/or marine species. There is hotspotting along the coastline and in distinct areas in the Mozambique Channel. There are clear hotspots on land. in the south between Inhambane and the Maputo city suburb of Matola. There is a large hotspot in the middle of the country in the Sofala and the Zambezia provinces, and a hotspot in the north that spans from the Niassa province, near the city of Lishinga, to the city of Palma on the northeast coast. The tables show that fish are the class with the most species impacted, with 2 species, Cape sole and Tana labeo. This is followed by mammals and reptiles, both with 1 species impacted each, the spotted-necked otter and the olive ridley sea turtle. Runoff is another subcategory of domestic and urban wastewater affecting 3 species, and this heat map shows the overlapping ranges for these species impacted by runoff in Mozambique, where range data is available. The dark areas represent multiple species impacted. Examples of runoff as defined by the IUCN Red List assessment include oil or sediment from roads, fertilizers and pesticides from lawns and golf courses, and road salt. There is hotspotting along the coastline, with darker hotspotting in the southern coastline south of Praia de Belina and multiple areas in the Mozambique Channel, possibly suggesting that runoff is impacting a greater number of coastal and/or marine species. There are clear hotspots on land. There's a large hotspot in the middle of the country in the Sofala and Zambezia provinces, and a hotspot in the north that spans from the Niassa province near the city of Lishinga to the city of Palma on the northeast coast. The table shows that fish are the class most impacted by runoff, with 2 species, and this is followed by mammals with 1 species impacted by pollution. There are 165 species impacted by the higher category of industrial and military effluents in Mozambique, which is made up of the subcategories of oil spills and seepage from mining. This heat map shows the overlapping ranges for species where range data is available. The darker areas are where multiple species are impacted. Industrial and military effluents are defined by the IUCN Red List as waterborne pollutants from industrial and military sources, including mining, energy production, and other resource extraction industries that include nutrients, toxic chemicals, and/or sediments. It is worth noting that the global analysis only identified 1 species impacted by the seepage and mining pollution subcategory, which is not enough data to produce a heat map. Therefore, a heat map will not be displayed for seepage and mining. More detailed information about the species can be found in the Pilot Country Pollution Analysis Report for Mozambique. There is hotspotting predominantly along the coastline in the Mozambique Channel, suggesting that the industrial and military effluents pose a greater threat on coastal and/or marine species. There is mostly even hotspotting inland throughout the country, with a slightly darker area along the south coast from Beira to Matola. Oil spills are a subcategory of industrial and military effluents affecting 3 species, and this heat map shows the overlapping ranges for those species impacted by oil spills in Mozambique, where range data is available. The darker areas represent multiple species impacted. Examples of sources of oil spills as defined by the IUCN Red List assessment include leakage from fuel tanks, oil spills from pipelines, PCBs in river sediments, etc. Hotspotting is in the ocean of the Mozambique Channel and more focused along the coastline, suggesting that oil spills pose a greater threat on coastal and/or marine species. The tables show that mammals are the class most heavily impacted by oil spills, with 2 species impacted, the Indian Ocean humpback dolphin and the dugong. This is followed by reptiles, with 1 species impacted, the hawksbill sea turtle. 190 species are impacted by the higher category of agricultural and forestry effluents in Mozambique, which is made up of the subcategories of nutrient loads, soil erosion, sedimentation, and herbicides and pesticides. As before, this heat map shows the overlapping ranges for those species where range data is available, and the darker areas indicate where multiple species are impacted. Agricultural and forestry effluents are defined by the IUCN Red List as waterborne pollutants from agricultural, silvicultural, and aquaculture systems that include nutrients, toxic chemicals and/or sediments, including the effects of these pollutants on the site where they are applied. There is much more widespread hotspotting, which may reflect this type of pollutant being more widely prevalent. There is darker hotspotting south of Quelimane to the very southern part of Mozambique, as well as along the coastline in a few areas in the Mozambique Channel. Nutrient loads is a subcategory of agricultural and forestry effluents, affecting 3 species, and this heat map shows the overlapping ranges for these species impacted by nutrient loads in Mozambique, where range data is available. The darker areas represents multiple species impacted. Examples of nutrient loads, as defined by the IUCN Red List assessment, include nutrient loading from fertilizer runoff, manure from feedlots, nutrients from aquaculture, etc. There is hotspotting along the coastline, with darker hotspotting along the southern coast, south of Quelimane, and hotspots in the Mozambique Channel. There is a small hotspot in the north of Mozambique, near the city of Lixinga. The tables indicate that fish are the class most heavily impacted, with 3 species impacted by nutrient loads, 2 freshwater species, and 1 exclusively marine species, Japanese meager. Soil erosion sedimentation is a subcategory of agricultural and forestry effluents and impacts 171 species. This heat map shows the overlapping ranges for species where range data is available that are impacted by soil erosion and sedimentation. Darker areas represent where multiple species are impacted. Examples of soil erosion sedimentation, as defined by the IUCN Red List assessments, include soil erosion from overgrazing, increased runoff, and hence sedimentation due to conversion of forest to agricultural lands. There is hotspotting predominantly along the coastline and multiple areas in the Mozambique Channel, suggesting that soil erosion sedimentation poses a greater threat on coastal and on marine species. There is also a large darker hotspot inland starting in the southeast of Mozambique near the Maputo city suburb Matola, and extending north along the coastline to Quelimane, then extending inland north towards the city of Lixinga. The table indicates that sea anemones and corals are the class most heavily impacted, with 153 species. This is followed by fish, with 10 species impacted, and plants with 3 species, mammals and snails, and slugs, both with 2 species impacted. At the bottom of the table, there is a category of birds with 1 species impacted by pollution. Another subcategory of agricultural and forestry effluents is herbicides and pesticides, affecting 13 species, and this heat map shows the overlapping ranges for those species impacted by herbicides and pesticides in Mozambique, where range data is available. The darker areas represent multiple species impacted. Examples of herbicides and pesticides, as defined by the IUCN Red List assessment, include herbicide runoff from orchards. There is widespread hotspotting, which may reflect there being widespread use of herbicides and pesticides across the country, but there is no hotspotting in ocean areas. The table shows that birds are the class most heavily impacted, with 11 species. This is followed by insects and mammals, with 1 species impacted each. Four species are impacted by the higher category of garbage and solid waste in Mozambique. This heat map shows overlapping ranges for species where range data is available. The darker areas are where multiple species are impacted. Garbage and solid waste is defined by the IUCN Red List as rubbish and other solid materials, including those that entangle wildlife. The heat map shows hotspotting around the coastline and offshore, with dark hotspotting north of Jangambo, suggesting it is mainly coastal and marine species threatened by garbage and solid waste. The tables show that mammals are the class most heavily impacted, with 2 species, sperm whale and false killer whale, followed by plants and reptiles, both with 1 species impacted each by garbage and solid waste pollution. 154 species are impacted by the higher category of airborne pollutants in Mozambique. This heat map shows overlapping ranges for species where range data is available. The darker areas are where multiple species are impacted. Airborne pollutants is defined by the IUCN Red List as atmospheric pollutants from point and non-point sources. Airborne pollutants include subcategories of acid rain, smog, and ozone. The heat map shows hotspotting around the coastline and several areas offshore in the Mozambique Channel, suggesting it is mainly coastal and/or marine species threatened by garbage and solid waste. There are two hotspots inland, one near the city of Manica, near the border with Zimbabwe, and another along the Malawi southern border. This is supported by the table, which shows that sea anemones and corals are the class most heavily impacted, with 153 species, and this is followed by birds with one species impacted. In some cases, particularly large ranging species, it's hard to associate the threats throughout the species range. It's not entirely clear where the species are located. So if we want to increase the chances that the species range is representative of threats such as pollution, we can limit our selection of species to only those that have small ranges. So here we demonstrate using the IUCN definition of restricted range, which is species whose entire area of occupancy is up to a maximum of 2,000 kilometers squared. All these areas are so small that the species would likely to be endemic to a single country. The orange patches shown on the map are the distribution of restricted range species currently in decline in Mozambique due to pollution. Because the threats to restricted range species are so site-specific, tackling pollution in any of these targeted areas is likely to reverse the risk of extinction for at least one species. The table shows that fish are the class in Mozambique with the most restricted range species impacted by pollution, with 6 freshwater fish species between the city of Lishinga and the northwest country border with Malawi. The global analysis allows us to explore the species threatened by pollution by taxonomic group. The graph on the left shows the number of species threatened by pollution divided by class. This graph reveals sea anemones and corals as having the greatest number of species threatened by pollution. This is then followed by birds and bony fishes. Insects are shown to have the least number of species threatened by pollution. The graph on the right highlights the proportion of species threatened by pollution in Mozambique, divided up by class. Similarly, this graph shows that sea anemones are the class with the greatest proportion of species threatened by pollution, followed by birds and bony fishes, with insects having the lowest proportion of species threatened by pollution. Classes not shown are where there are no species meeting the criteria of being threatened or near threatened, as classified by the IUCN Red List, or do not have at least one of the IUCN pollution threat categories increasing their risk of extinction. The global analysis also enables us to pick out specific species threatened by pollution, and this slide highlights a few examples of species in Mozambique. All species on this slide have an extinction risk assessed as either vulnerable, near threatened, endangered, or critically endangered. From the top left to right, there is the African clawless otter and the spotted nerit snail, both classified as near threatened. In the middle of the slide, there is the camouflage grouper, classified as vulnerable. At the bottom left of the slide, there is the hooded vulture, classified as critically endangered, and on the right of the slide, the baitlia, classified as endangered. It is possible to find more information about specific species on the IUCN Red List webpage and to identify specific pollution threats impacting species. For example, searching the IUCN Red List website for the hooded vulture reveals that this species has an extinction risk of critically endangered, here shown in bold red. The information also shows that this species is threatened by agricultural and forestry effluents, and in particular herbicides and pesticides. This results in species mortality, which leads to very rapid declines. To summarise, results were obtained by overlaying range maps of threatened species by pollution and creating heat maps to hotspot areas where multiple species are threatened. The results can be broken down and shown by pollution type, species, and taxonomic group, with more detailed information being provided on the IUCN Red List webpage. Finally, we would like you to think about how this information reflects what you know about pollution in Mozambique. The next 2 slides present a series of questions we would like you to discuss, and we invite the workshop organiser to pause on each slide to allow you to think about the topics presented. Finally, we thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation and value your help and discussions. We are also happy to answer any questions, and our contact details can be found on the last slide of this presentation. Thank you for listening.